Making noises. I'm making noises because I'm doing a sound check. Uh, Making noises. There are noises being made right now, like see if I can get over here and cool. All right, so it looks like we're on. Looks like we're working. All right, so it looks like we're on, and looks like everything should be functioning properly. So it looks like we're on, and yeah, this is going to be a stream about wokeness again. But like we're gonna try to make this concise and focused. The first hour, which might be the the first a little over an hour, probably an hour and 15 minutes, will be the time when Kimani can speak. So I'll be giving him a lot of airtime, and a lot of time for people to respond generally to the points that he makes. Kimani is new to the channel, and we basically had a spatteroo in a fucking Facebook GM, and so we're over here saying words to each other about it now, and hopefully tone will be better conveyed, and we can reach some understandings, as is the usual on these streams. Because my channel, as those of you who have been following it for a while know, operates differently to a significant amount of other channels out there, and I actually want people to have constructive dialogue and shit. So we'll be seeing if we can get some of that fucking shit in this bitch. Let's get going. We'll start with an introduction of Kimani, and then we'll go Bigfoot, Bread, and Rose, and then all intro. We'll just do like a few minutes letting people know who we are, what our position is in the woke versus anti-woke thing, in a general rundown, and then we can proceed from there and start asking questions. Kimani.
All right, yeah. So I'm Kimani. So I'm generally against like the concept of woke, at least as like an ideology, like focused around identitarianism. Like, oh well, I'm this particular racial identity, sexual identity, whatever, and my worth as a person, my moral status as a person revolves around that. Now, I in our previous discussions, a lot of people brought up, they say, well, they associate the word with like just like general acceptance for people, like regardless of their race or their sexual orientation or identity or whatnot. And I get that, but I think that was generally like the cultural norm, like even before the woke thing became popularly termed as it's currently understood now. So like back during like the late 90s, the 2000s, the early 2010s, like they were generally accepted that like it's not cool to like be a douche to people because of like they're this race or the other. I think we had general acceptance of like sexual differences and whatnot. So like nobody really refers to that as a person revolving around that. Now, most people refer to it because they associate this really aggressive institutional push that we're seeing. Like you have like a lot of these corporate entities pushing like DEI and ESG stuff that just kind of has this agenda of just kind of forcing it down everybody's throat. You also have like more like grassroots stuff, or like some you call like woke scolds. Like basically you have like these bigoted cry bullies that try to weaponize identity and try to take over like institutions or stuff like that. So that's what I refer to when I talk about woke, not like social acceptance or social harmony or justice or anything like that. Just like the really virulent like crap that's like creeping through institutions. And honestly, it's the first time in my life that I've actually seen like institutional like bigotry and like discrimination becoming a thing.
All right.
So before that, growing up as a kid, I didn't see that.
All right. So Bigfoot, your intro and your position generally on the topic.
Gotcha. Well, I am the anarcho-Appalachian. I live in the woods constantly, in fear of being discovered by the government, and they'll find all of my many illegal activities up there, like living free and breathing clean air and loving animals and hugging trees. And my stance on the woke issue is an iconoclastic or anti-termism, basically. I don't like the use of words that have negative connotations in general when it comes to spreading the message of anarchy. There's some words we have to stand by as far as English is concerned. Things like liberty and anarchy itself, I see, have too much utility to be passed on by negative connotation. However, I feel like slang terms, especially terms that have been coined within the last, like, say, 100 to 200 years, are definitely at risk of becoming soured in the public eye and becoming antithetical to spreading the message. Words like capitalism and, in my opinion, libertarianism, and as regards this debate, woke, which I feel like has become a word that engenders too much automatic knee-jerking on any side wherever it's spoken. So my position is to avoid using the term while still maintaining what I feel like is Jeremy's understanding of the word. But that's neither here nor there.
All right. Bread?
I had to push the button. I'm Bread. I have kind of a nuanced stance on this whole woke thing. Like, I know what the origins of woke is, and I know how it's used modernly, which is not even remotely the same thing. In fact, it's actually more of an appropriation. And honestly, I have the uncontrollable urge to discount anyone who uses the word.
Just put your mic a little closer to your face, maybe, or speak louder.
Is that better?
Yeah, there's a
Can
noise.
you hear me?
There's like a noise gate or something. It keeps on cutting you off.
Oh no, a noise gate. Jeez, is that better? Does that help?
Should be.
All right, sorry. So like, I don't really like the word woke modernly used because I think that it's just being appropriated and misused by both liberals and conservatives. To be fair, I don't really hear free folk calling themselves woke. I don't even really hear any form of statist leftist calling themselves woke either. This seems to be something that only conservatives use, and they use it poorly. It doesn't mean what they say, what they act like it means. And to me, it just seems to be another expression of their like snowflake outrage at anybody out there who is trying to push for any form of acceptance. So I absolutely hate the word woke being used because more often than not, it's being used improperly and aggressively to end conversations that are actually about trying to make things more inclusive. It tends to be a tool of bigots. And on the other end, if you have to tell somebody you're woke, you're not woke. People should be able to tell. Now, we're talking about the behavior of wokeness. I think we should all be woke. Everyone here should be woke or get woke.
All right. And Rose, you were going to introduce yourself and give a general summary, I think, was what your plan was?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it sounds like we're all kind of giving our position statements. So
yeah, you can do that too, obviously.
Yeah. I'm Rose. By now, most people who follow this channel probably already know me. I am the only real libertarian here. I'm a small libertarian, also somewhat involved in the Libertarian Party. In any event, so as far as the topic is concerned, there are certain words, woke, social justice, intersectionality, that tend to trigger a particular knee-jerk response in people in our circles. It's not because there's anything wrong with the concepts it's not because there's anything wrong with the ideas behind these terms necessarily, but because of how they've been used over the past decade, primarily. For example, woke used to just mean, you're aware of the existence of systemic injustices. However, over time, that has been twisted and been associated with what we refer to now as identity politics. Ideas that should have provided us with a means of analyzing the different struggles and societal disadvantages of different groups and leading to a better understanding between the different groups have instead led to what we like to refer to as the oppression Olympics and led to increased division. in actuality, what we should realize is that, you know, most of the problems that we all faced can be traced back to actions taken by the state. This should lead to greater unity. Instead, it just has led to greater division. Why is this? Well, it's obvious, because the statist system that we live under benefits by increased division. They benefit by making people feel as if they have to, you know, vie for special privileges or special protections, and so it has led to different, you know, marginalized groups feeling like they're in competition for special protections. It has also led to different groups feeling like they've been pitted against each other. For example, you know, you'll see conservatives being like, oh, those LGBT rights groups are getting, you know, all the funding and all the, you know, protections. Therefore, we're now being oppressed. And it's ultimately it's dangerous. Like, it has, you know, it's led to groups of, you know, people who should be united demonizing each other. It's, you know, leading to violence. But all in all, like, this, at the end of the day, this divisiveness has led to what we like to call the woke grifters and the anti-woke grifters. These are two sides of the same coin. They're people who are just seeking to, you know, gain publicity and make a profit off of, you know, capitalizing off of grievance cultures. So that kind of brings me to the disagreement that led to us deciding to do this stream. Basically, what happened was Jeremy, you know, made a post mentioning that he's against what he refers to as the anti-woke grift. Kimani responded that, you know, he's opposed to wokeism because he views it as just leading to weaponization of people's immutable characteristics, ultimately leading to greater division. Another friend of ours then replied back that that's not what, you know, woke means, you know, that we should not, you know, dismiss the idea that different groups have different struggles, and that we need to recognize these struggles if we're, you know, in order to lead to liberation for all people. Just because certain people use the term, you know, in bad faith to, you know, cause division or to, you know, sell a grift or whatever. And that also misuse of this term has also provided cover for people who actually are bigoted to, you know, say they're against wokeness, but in actuality, they actually are against, you know, equal treatment of all people and equal rights.
Huh. So basically, those are reasonable sums. Like, although the thing that led to the spat in the GC was that, you know, being the resident edgy, abrasive asshole hedgehog, I had to come in and be like, fucking, yeah, this person you liked the comment of, that guy's a Nazi, because he is a Nazi. And that
a Nazi.
Yeah. That I think led to the misperception that I was calling Kimani White a Nazi. And to be clear, I don't think you're a Nazi. I want to start off on those terms. I want to start off with that nice handshake that I don't think you're a Nazi, Kimani.
I will make for a very weird Nazi, considering I'm a black guy. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, a black Nazi, that they gotta meet their DEI quotas, or they can't operate these days. So if you want to be a Nazi organization, you gotta have a black guy, gotta have a trans guy. You know, they gotta, you know, it's 2024. You know, make Nazism great again.
DEI compliant racism.
Yeah. It's like fucking Media Monarchy says, pride flags on drone bombs. So let's start off on my end with this. I think that throwing away the term wouldn't make the divide go away, and that whether or not you use the term, people will still have this divide. They will just label it something else. When the Nazis wanted to call somebody woke, they didn't use the term woke because that term didn't exist yet. They used the term Untermensch, degenerate. That's what they used. So the general mentality I want to convey is that the word describes a set of behaviors, and that set of behaviors that the word describes can obviously be dynamic, like, because after a certain point of, like, duck-like behavior, you have to call that a duck. And when people are using the label woke to apply to, like, like for their own actions and mentalities and beliefs, and saying, I have no problem with being woke, or wokeness includes X, Y, and Z, then, you can call that woke eventually. But it's the same sort of way that you could also say that anarchy means chaos. That anarchy comes from a destabilized position due to a lack of central rulership. And so for me, from my position, I'm not going to let them have this word, the people who would misuse it on either side. And from my position, it's a very similar position to saying you're an anarchist. Even though there's like so many people, including the dictionary writers themselves, who say that anarchy is about chaos, and this is what happens when society is rudderless. Shit. But so like ultimately, I'm in team. Don't sacrifice. Don't cede. Don't let them have it, because the fascists and the authoritarians in general love to steal culture. They do not have their own culture. They sap and destroy creatives. They fuck people's ability to empathize with one another. They gradually destroy the foundations of the cultures that they want to subvert, so that they can like build their new culture on top of the ashes and rubble. And I am meaning to destroy theirs using the terminology that I think effectively conveys my point. It's from like this original like interpretation of the term woke. Like I went over in the last Wokestream, which I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that yet, Kimani, or Bread. I'm not exactly sure, but like what I can tell you is that when I like describe this term, I'm talking about it in the sense that if you're woke, you get it. In that original like sort of article, that article went over woke as the idea of, I can feel the vibes of the systemic oppression because I've noticed how certain people get treated unfairly by the media, by their governments, by society in general. And I can be aware of that because I'm cognizant of it, and I'm not shutting myself down. I'm not falling asleep. I'm woke. I'm not going to become numb to the things that are obvious to me. And so to me, it's like that. And because this word was brought up, and I think it's actually based to be this, I'll throw this in here as sort of an informational bomb that can maybe be responded to chiefly by Kimani. But I personally think intersectionality is necessary. I think understanding how all of our oppressions have similar overlapping and enmeshing characteristics and like foundations and results and things like that is a way to understand how the system actually operates. And one of the ways that they get us to hate each other is by getting us to avoid thinking about that too hard, avoid thinking about how the system runs, avoid thinking about how like we're controlled by fundamentally the same forces, and those forces are going to fuck us out of shit. And I think that a significant amount of problems have come because people didn't actually buy acceptance. Like you say that like acceptance was at an all-time high, and then wokes just came along and ruined it. No, I don't think that's true. I think acceptance started to come about, and a roving insurgency of people from the old right and beyond, Red Scarers and all, started to come up and say that this is what happens when the communists are in charge and shit like that, which is why like during the Bush era Patriot Act times, it was considered very acceptable, for instance, to be racist to Middle Easterns. It's why like the BLM movement needed to happen at all, because like they were disproportionately affected by police violence, brutality, and corruption. And it's why the LGBT movement is starting to see a whole bunch of people saying we're not going to pretend anymore, because that's what they were doing. They were pretending to accept these people, and for years and years, the only reason they were doing it is because they thought society would come down on them like a bag of hammers if they didn't. And when they found out that society actually doesn't give that much of a fuck about LGBT people, they were like, oh, I can be a bigot in the open. I can be a piece of shit and nothing's going to happen to me. Because the system is actually fundamentally partly controlled by the people who are responsible for this. So that's my mentality. My mentality is, I think, like, the system is fundamentally controlled by people who are anti-woke, who are right-winger, state capitalist authoritarians who want control, and that there is a divide that they are manipulating in the culture war, but they're doing that so that people on the working class ground are fighting, between majority represented people and minority represented people. And so that, like, those majority represented people can feel as though they still have systemic power, even though the power has been, like, stripped from them a long time ago by a whole lot of people. And I think that until we realize our intersectional oppression, until we realize that there is an undercurrent of oppression that we all experience that all has similar causes and points of convergence, so that we can unite against that and unite against all of the actual foundations here, we are fucked. And so in the argument between woke and anti-woke, I am like 100% all in on the woke side, because I think at least they're trying to have a conversation about that shit. And without that conversation, we will never see freedom. I'm going to give you an equal amount of time to what I just took, so that'll be about 8 minutes, Kimani, to respond, and then people can, we'll go Bigfoot, Bread, and Rose in response to your statements. Then I'll say words.
Yeah, so about the point of like the intersectionality, right? Like, so I don't think fixating on like traits of people is productive and the least good. Like, someone isn't more or less oppressed like ontologically based on like what traits or combination of traits that they have like as identifiers. What it really comes down to is like who that person is. Like, I'm really like kind of on board with the MLK thing, judging people by the content of their character, as opposed to like, well, he's saying instead of the color of their skin, but like their sexuality, anything like that. Like, all of that other stuff is superficial. You can't necessarily tell what somebody's socioeconomic status is just based off of like those like superficial characteristics. And that's kind of besides the point. Like, if you want to deal with oppression, look, the government is an equal opportunity oppressor at this point, right? Everybody that's under the thumb of the government and isn't in some privileged position within the government is getting screwed over by it in some way, fashion, or form. So instead of getting like caught up in like irrelevant minutia about like what are people's skin tones or what their genitalia are or what they identify as, we should be just dealing with like the system that's just there, like farming us for resources and power, like, and not make it a sectarian thing, because that's really counterproductive. Now, as far as like, social progress or like the state of things, like, look, like, we can kind of take it for granted. Like, I grew up in a time where like being like a Black person minority, like I never really had to deal with like any real like hardcore like systemic racism. I would hear stuff about like, from my parents or like older generations of people, like things are not as bad as they used to be. We're nowhere near as bad as what it was like in Jim Crow or anything like that. And even in terms of like LGBTQ acceptance, right? Like, for the most part, like coming through the 90s and into the 2000s, it really was becoming generally culturally accepted, to the point where they were just like, oh, like, we pushed through like gay marriage. And for the most part, you had some people like making like whining about it or whatever, and then it went through, and then everybody went on with their lives. Nobody freaking cared. It became more commonplace, see it in like in common culture, pop culture. Nobody's really worried about that. So like, as far as like the systemic racism, like actual legit racial oppression, that had been gone like by the time like most of us in this call were born. That had been gone like by the time like most of us in this call. Everything that kind of came, that kind of came to full fruition like during our lifetimes. So like, pretty much like now people are just like fighting a war against like fighting battles in a war that's already pretty much been won. there are other places in the world that actually do have like systemic oppression against like ethnic minorities and people's sexuality and stuff like that. But nobody's really fixating on that. It's mostly just like spoiled people in developed Western countries complaining about how they don't feel like they're privileged enough relative to other demographics in their well-to-do countries. And like we shouldn't be focusing on that. We should be focusing on just like increasing freedoms for everybody across the board. Forget what their race or sexuality is. Now, in terms of like what people have referred to as woke, it is not all of like the social acceptance of all of that stuff. We're talking about like mostly like what you've been calling like the woke skulls or the idpol people, and even in institutional stuff. And I don't even think about it in terms of like necessarily right wing or left wing or anything, because you even have like people like Larry Fink of like BlackRock, like several years back, when he's sitting there gloating about like, oh, he's going to use his position to force certain behaviors, right? They're coming into institutions, basically come up with like a corporate credit system to kind of like force institutions and businesses and corporations, like denying them like investments and stuff like that, and unless they follow these particular criteria, and just have like these tokenized check marks and whatnot. They push these DEI agendas that basically turn HR into like these freaking like chaplains of like bigotry, where people like are basically brainwashed into like being more cognizant of their racial differences, and like it's certain like informal pecking orders based on that. Like that shit is like twisted and toxic. Then you have like even like on the ground, like people that like you brought up before in the chat, like the Evergreen University bros, where you have like just like these students just basically at prompting of like a lot of like ideologically possessed professors, they're basically radicalized students to be basically racial bigots. Just like, oh, we're gonna have a day of like no white people on campus and everything, and people are doing actual violence, right? Like based off of race. You have like campuses where they start bringing back literal racial segregation, even during like freaking 2020, where you know a lot of places where they had like the so-called the little free zones with that they set up in certain places, where like, all right, they kind of like took over certain blocks and everything. They wanted to kind of set up their own thing, but within those little bubbles that they set up, they created racial segregations and racial pecking orders, and recreated all of the things that they said they wanted to eliminate from wider society, right? And it's like these so-called autonomous zones, they just actually recreated like and retrogressed back to like previous levels of bigotry in places like that. So like I get the idea, and the sentiment is just like, oh well, on the surface the movement is saying, oh, we want equity, we want exception, we want inclusion and everything. But in practice, in a lot of places, people that get on board this hype train end up bringing about the exact opposite of what they say they want. And I think the ideal is what society, the trajectory that society was already on, just people naturally becoming more accepting of like superficial differences and just like getting on with stuff. Like this shit isn't necessary, and we sure as hell don't need like freaking like owners of like freaking multi-trillion-dollar institutions like trying to shove shit down our throats like they're moral fucking authorities and making shit worse. They're like fucking up something that wasn't broke. Like it was broke before, it was in the process of getting fixed, and it's getting better. And this shit is just setting it back, and it's adding. And like even like you brought up, oh, this guy's a Nazi. Oh yeah, America has had a history of racism, right? But for the most part, like the KKK types, the neo-Nazi types, over the generations coming in the present day, they're become like a marginal force. They don't have institutional power. They're just basically like isolated, scattered regness. It's probably just like a few thousand of them across the country, and almost none of them are in positions of power. The real threat is the new brand of bigotry and the new brand of racism that's taking over institutions and shifting the culture in the negative direction. And that's what I have an issue with. I'm not being like, oh, right wing reactionary, this, that, or the other. I'm like, no, like you can use whatever word for it you want, but what I'm talking about is the agenda. What I'm taking issue with is certain toxic agendas that are like gaining like primacy, and it's really fucking dangerous, and it can ruin things for all of us.
Move on to Bigfoot. Or not. Bigfoot?
Are you still there?
Hey, sorry, I haven't been here in the last like 30 minutes. We had an emergency. A snake was getting into my chicken pen.
Not a problem. A problem, but not a problem that you weren't here.
Good.
Don't worry, it's dead now.
That's a
But anyway,
badass problem to have, by the way.
it was a rat snake. It wasn't that big of a deal. Anyway, you were throwing it to me. I'm gonna pass to the next person and then make some comments after I hear what's going on.
All right, so we'll go Bread, Rose, and then me, and then you.
All right.
Muted.
Thank you. I forget sometimes. Teamwork, making the dream work. Anyways, so like, I totally agree with Jeremiah on most of this. I'm not gonna lie. I do want to add in that there is a time when we do have to acknowledge that something has been properly appropriated and needs to be thrown in the trash. But in this situation, there is still an active pushback for the concept of woke versus how people are using it. So like, I'm still with you on the let's fight for wokeness. Just to be clear, because I thought that was a little bit unclear to start with. Most of my responses are going to be for both here who just spoke. I've noticed that while you're really hyper focused on the Democrat agenda, you are participating in the conservative agenda, the statist conservative agenda, by helping be anti woke. Like you're acknowledging one side or the other. In order to defeat the culture war and the things that divide us, we cannot play along. Even if you don't like one side more than the other side, you cannot just pick a side because you like that one more. The anti-woke people, that is a right-wing based thing. It came directly from the right-wing statists, and they immediately started using it inappropriately and using it to deperson people. And they use this, like they take what the statist politicians and policies are doing, and they staple that onto the face of every individual in the crowd and use it to attack them through that, even though most of these individuals in the crowd had literally no power over what the hell just happened. Liberals and conservatives are working together to completely radicalize people who would otherwise not participate in this stuff. The liberals will misuse the concept of being progressive and force it upon people and get crazy with it, and they go to their people and they use the media and their politicians to get them worked up and wild. And because they don't educate them on the progressive stuff and the history of why they're mad, they just know that they're mad. They have them running off to attack anybody who says anything other or asks a question, which doesn't radicalize the right into the right. They're already fucking there. Who it radicalizes are the people who haven't decided, the people who are like trying to understand things, or the more like reasonable parts of the left. It pushes them away and makes them stumble backwards into the right. And the right grabs them and goes, yeah, I know, they called you a Nazi, they call me a Nazi too. But what you don't see is underneath that guy's shirt is a Nazi tattoo. But you just related with him and made friends with him and started saying the same shit he's saying, and you joined the other side. You didn't contest the state. You didn't contest statism. You didn't contest the statist fight, which means literally nothing, that only serves to keep us divided. You just joined a different side. You jumped from one side to another. And just because the statists are misusing this shit and trying to use it to divide us, doesn't mean that we need to be humoring either side of this. What I believe we should be doing is actually like, well, honestly, I kind of push the right. Like when they say woke, because they're literally the only people who say that. The people who say woke on in any other space are doing it ironically or to make fun of a right winger. Or some right-leaning person who is part of the right side of the culture war. So you end up with these people saying woke this, woke that, woke this, woke that, and I'm like, hey, can you define woke? And most of them cannot. Most of them have no idea what it is. They just get mad and start spewing about how inclusivity is horrible. 1 out of 10 people, and that is being extremely kind, that uses the word wokeism as a negative at all, turn out not to be bigots in my experience. And I talk to hundreds, if not thousands of people a week. It's not a game. It's not funny. It's not cute. You're not doing anything by joining the anti-woke crowd, except for joining a side in the culture war, which makes you upholding the state. What we need to be doing out here is enforcing actual definitions, because the word is not gone, and there are actually people out there being woke as fuck right now. We need to actually be like, yeah, I'm woke. It means this. Or do you actually know what that means? Or do you know where the trend of using that recently came from? This isn't going to work on the right because they don't care. But on free folk who are leaning towards market anarchy or market minarchy or trad anarchy or anything like that, I hope that it will like appeal to their logic, because they like history, they like logic. But right now they are emotionally attached to this thing. A lot of them have joined this battle. We have to yell at people at ANCOMs and stuff like that too, because they want to protect marginalized people. The idea that systemic racism is gone is ridiculous. And it denotes a misunderstanding of what systemic means. Yes, it is probably a little bit better than it used to be, but it is definitely far from gone. And comparing our problems to other countries' problems, as a means of invalidating them is crap. Because just because somebody has something worse doesn't mean we have it good. It means we have it better. But better doesn't mean good. And until it's good, we should not stop fighting for anyone. They've got us divided by literally everything. People are at different levels, and they want us to envy those levels. What we need to be doing is actually being woke and reaching out, identifying those inaccurate levels that we're on, and pushing people up and pulling people up until we're all standing on the same damn platform and can look at them and call their ass down. Because keeping us on these different levels and fighting each other and joining their word games and stuff is literally just keeping things the way they are and rolling them towards something worse. It's creating violence. And it is, like Rose said, actually giving bigots, or no wait, that was Rose. It is giving bigots a place to hide.
Rose?
Oh, wow. So I should say, I really hope it's not, 9 out of 10 people using the word woke that are actual bigots. Because, I mean, I hear this term thrown around all the time in my circles now. And I feel like most people who use it don't even know what it means. Not only do they not know its origins, they don't even know what they're complaining about. They're just vaguely complaining about, culture war shit that they see as, being divisive and used, or in a lot of cases being used to demonize them. Like, I interact with people all the time who have been unfairly accused of being racist or, white nationalist, Nazis, whatever, whatever the current buzzword is. And, they attribute this to, wokeness, or, and then before wokeness was thrown around, it was, PC culture, it was identity politics. And so this is actually very common for people, who kind of came from the left like me, because I had viewed myself as being on the left for most of my life. Started out as an ANCOM, then, went through a thankfully brief, embarrassing period as a Democrat, then kind of started coming back towards minarchism and then anarchy. During my Democrat phase, though, is when the PC culture, identity politics stuff started to really take off. Like, I'm old enough to remember when Democrats pretended to be, the ones who cared about free speech and individual freedoms. Then, over time I started seeing, attempts to, for example, shut down speakers that at college campuses or elsewhere that people didn't like, attempts to get people censored and removed off the internet, get YouTube channels banned, get, TV shows taken off the air, get, books not carried by, bookstores, you name it. And like, this was kind of a shock. I'm like, okay, I mean, I don't like what some of these people are saying, but this just seems over the top. Like, this is counterproductive. This is coming across as bullying. Like, we should be, saying, like, we should be engaging in dialogue, and we should be telling people why, we think these people are wrong, not just trying to silence them. This also gave rise to things like, like Kimani brought up earlier, like the situation at Evergreen College. I think that was one of the one of the first high profile examples of this, and then there were many other examples that followed of people of mobs actually going after people who had been expressing views that the student body did not agree with. So in any event, like, for me and for a lot of people who had been in my position, this led to me saying, okay, wow, this is what the left is turning into? No, fuck them. Like, this leads to people going through, a reactionary phase. This is how you create reactionaries. And I think a lot of people who are throwing the term woke around are using it to describe the behavior that I just described. Like, they're using it to describe, cancel culture mobs. They're using it to describe, divisive identity politics that I actually do believe are being deliberately pushed because, the ruling establishment has a vested interest in keeping the people divided so that we don't know who our actual enemies are. And I tried to explain this to people who throw around the term woke. I'm like, these marginalized groups that are being constantly talked about, they're not the ones that are actually pushing divisive identity politics. It's, the establishment who wants you to hate other members of the ruling class because they cannot have you achieving unity and realizing who your real enemy is. But I guess, what did I want to address? I guess that brings me to the question of, like, should we try to salvage the term woke, or should we acknowledge that, the term has been tarnished beyond all, repair, and just not try to use it to mean, recognition of systemic injustice or recognition of, individuals or, certain groups' struggles and, systemic problems that have been created. Because I do think, like, there's a point at which there's just no real point in trying to salvage a particular term. Like, for example, I think William brought this, or Appalachian Anarchist brought this up earlier. Like, I find trying to salvage the word capitalism to be a complete waste of time. I think we should just say free markets, because we're just doing damage to our own cause by trying to conflate capitalism with free markets. Like, should we take the same approach with woke? Should we say, okay, woke does not mean what it was, like, yeah, woke does not mean what we want it to. We should just, tell people what we mean. We should just say systemic injustice or systemic discrimination or whatever. So those are my thoughts on the matter.
So let me just start by answering that, because like Mike said when they had their comment, there is the general thing is that people who use the term woke are generally labeling people as woke or labeling something as woke. Generally the people who they're describing are doing the describing what they're doing, and then somebody comes along and says that sounds woke, now you're gonna go broke. And that brings me to another thing that I wrote down here. I'm building up my little notes cache, but you said that the wokes are silencing people, banning books, etc., but the current people who are doing the primary canceling, if not the people who are doing the primary canceling historically, are the people who are saying literally, get woke, go broke. That is a threat to anyone who does not toe their conservative cultural line, that your product will fail, your business will fail, you will fail, we will make you fail. You said they're silencing people, banning books, etc., but Chaya Raichik of Libs of TikTok is on her local school board and decides what books kids are and aren't allowed to read. And Moms for Liberty are the speaker-canceling book banners at this point, some of whom are actively advocating burning books. And when I talk about these sorts of things, that's what I'm opposing. Because, to reply directly to Kimani, Charlottesville, Fuentes rallies, Gab, CPAC eradication speech, where Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, which is the most popular, not just conservative news site, but the most popular news site on Facebook. And that is the most popular social media platform, despite how much Elon Musk wants to jack off. Like, the most popular social media platform has the most popular outlets being conservative outlets, including Daily Wire, PragerU, and a variety of other institutions funded by massively billionaire-moded right-wing fucking authoritarians. And those people are the ones who fuel people like Mike Knowles. Mike Knowles gave a speech at CPAC to thunderous applause from lobbyists, politicians, people involved in the running of the actual system, where he said we must eradicate transgenderism from public life. That is Nazism. That is institutional, systemic Nazism. And when these people are at the helm, when CPAC and APAC have such close ties, and when those have such close ties with every other conservative organization, and they are all walking in lockstep, boosting people like who do the wellness center, I think is the product that they all advertise. When all these people are part of the same content advertising networks, all part of the same conservative content chambers, and all of this is directly influencing public rallies for things like Nick Fuentes, where thousands upon thousands of people will gather to hear one Nazi speak because they're Nazis as well, when he has millions of people supporting him online, when Charlottesville itself was thousands of people, when all of these things exist, claiming that the Nazi presence has dwindled to a few thousand people. No, it hasn't. The American Nazi Party itself has more than a few thousand people. And those are just the people in that party, which most Nazis in America disavow because they say it's feds running that joint. There's also the Nazis that affiliate with Proud Boys. There's the Nazis that affiliate with Patriot Front. There's the Nazis that literally infiltrate places in order to try to sway their left-wing momentum, which is what the original Nazis did. Like the Nazis that I helped push out of the anti-war rally Humanity for Peace. All these Nazis and more, I could keep listing them. The fact that the U.S. And Ukraine were two of the most consistent no votes on a UN proposition to condemn Nazism, the fact that Western countries have been doing that for a decade, and only just recently had the excuse that Russia is an aggressive entity and that's why we're not accepting their proposition. When the global acceptance is for the anti-wokes, and the anti-wokes are the ones doing this shit, then that's the place I'm left with it. Because, like, Evergreen's Brett Weinstein, for instance, you want to bring him up? He went on Jimmy Dore and just spent like an hour lying about trans people. And I went over that in a thread where Jimmy Dore was actively lying that it's easier for a child to get their genitals chopped off than it is for them to get access to a tanning bed. He's a liar. That's bigotry, and he called trans people groomer, and Brett Weinstein helped him. And these people are all part of this gigantic circle jerk at this point of anti-trans bullshit. And it's a grift so easy to get into that somebody like Russell Brand can declare himself a Christian and get access to the space. And so all of that is true. And then you get to the point where it's Mises Caucus and many rightoid libertarians are actively endorsing this strategy and consistently talking shit about trans people. Bread, when they get back in here, can devote some time to the betrayal that they felt because of the sheer amount of bigotry and vitriol that these people who pretended, let's be clear, pretended to accept them and are now being given the opportunity to be vocal about calling them slurs in public, and be like anti-trans bigots in public. Those people are generally the people who I'm talking about when I say that the anti-woke is a grift, and that they didn't need somebody to push them in this direction. This direction was the direction where they already were. And most wokes aren't trying to weaponize their identity or leverage it for a moral position. They're people who were labeled woke because they were talking about inclusivity. And intersectionality is important because, like, it's not just about, like, some sort of innate trait. Intersectionality also includes class, it includes employment type, it includes religion, it includes things that we can all sort of start to pick apart the systemic structures with. And I think that's extremely important. So my question, like, and I'll say this also, there's no forced DEI. DEI isn't like a government board where they come in from the official U.S. DEI bureau with their DEI badges and say, we have a DEI warrant to DEI your business. People hire DEI people because they want their businesses to be more inclusive. And let's be clear, the reason they want that, not being forced, is because it makes them more money to seem like they aesthetically support these people, even if they're just pretending themselves. Amazon doesn't give a fuck about black people, but it celebrates black whatever every time it does. They'll still treat the global south like shit. Amazon doesn't give a fuck about, like, LGBT people because they will routinely work with and support anti-LGBT institutions. Like, this is the real truth, is that they're all lying about their acceptance. They don't accept shit, and they haven't. And now they're just being given the chance to express it in public. That's the reality that I see. So I'll just ask Kimani, and then I'll pass it to Bigfoot for general comments before we pass it back. What should the proper level of acceptance, the proper level according to you of acceptance, be for these people? And what should LGBT, for instance, people not do that they're doing? Or black people, or whatever, in order to be less targeted by these people? We'll pass it to Bigfoot, and then Kimani can respond in general to these things. Unless you want to do it in the opposite order. I'll leave it up to the two of you.
I can go either way. It's up to Kimani.
I'll answer while the question is still fresh in the air.
Sure thing.
Like,
I'll go after you.
Yeah, I'll try to go in the order that you brought the stuff up in as best I can. So, like, you brought up, like, the freaking Daily Wire. It's just basically like a bunch of neocon reactionary shows or whatever. Like, yeah, they're like traditionalist, like, religious people or whatever. They're not proper, but they are a strain of, like, authoritarian leanings. They are statist, and a lot of their reactionary stuff is in reaction to, like, a lot of, like, the excesses that have been pushed, like, in recent years. So, like, yeah, there has been a push to, like, freaking push children towards, like gender modifying treatments and everything. Like, it's not cool to be, like, pushing minors towards it. That should be an adult decision, an adult choice. But the fact that this is becoming, like, a more prominent thing, and it's a more thing that's being pushed, you have, like, adults, like, basically literally grooming children towards taking, like, these permanent, like, medical alterations to themselves. That's not cool, and that's just providing fodder and freaking out, like, the freaking, like, rightoids, and having, like, an overreactive backlash. That that is reactionary, and it is a response to, like, excesses, and even with other stuff with the transition, where you have pushes for putting, like, biological males into female spaces, having, like, freaking grown ass dudes that just, like, decided to call themselves females, like, a few weeks before, bigger and stronger than them, like, competing with female in sports or being in locker rooms with women or whatever. Like, there's, like, a lot of, like, fucked up, inappropriate shit that's being pushed in the names of supporting trans people, and it's only setting them back. Like, that shit is, like bad for children, it's bad for women, and it's bad for trans people, because it just creates fodder and all this fear towards them, and all this backlash is fucked up. Now, as far as like the whole like Nazism thing, like yeah, there are like Nazis and everything, and I'm not good. We don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any ideological Nazis within this government. They're their own flavor of like authoritarian or whatnot. Like, yeah, there probably are like freaking Nazis in like Ukraine. There are some Nazis over here. But at the end of the day, like that ideology, like the German national socialism, like white supremacy thing, that doesn't have any cultural or institutional purchase right now. Right now, it's a most of it, what we're seeing right now in terms of like identity politics is the ones that are people that are pushing, like claiming to be championing marginalized people and like pushing extreme shit that is like turning the culture against them. And then you have like the reactionaries that are coming up and calling themselves the counter to that. And it's just going to be turned into a clusterfuck if it's allowed to continue. Now, in terms of like you brought up the DEI thing, you say, oh, well, there's no state government policy pushing that. There's no officers coming with badges enforcing. Yeah, the enforcement mechanism, you have like these big like investment firms like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. You have like these big firms that have like, 401ks, like all the people that put their money in, that have like their money invested or so this stuff, and they have like tens of trillions of dollars in assets that they control. And then they created the system. It's basically a corporate credit system. Like China has a social credit system, they have this credit system where they can restrict like a company's access to capital unless they meet these particular guidelines. So I kind of mentioned this guy Larry Fink. He's the one that's currently running like BlackRock, but he did explicitly say like a handful of years ago that he was going to be using his position, using his corporation to force behaviors. Right? Yeah, it's not directly a government organization, but they are leveraging the capital that they have to force corporations into line, and it's creating toxic work environments for the companies that do decide to go on board with it, so that they can maintain capital flow. Right? You have these freaking DEI stuff, and it isn't about just like, oh, we're just making sure everybody's bills included. Like, no, it's literally like segregating people and just treating people differently based off of their race, based off of their sexual characteristics. That is the opposite of like having like social justice. Like, all we need is just a society where people just treat each other like people and not freaking like treat people according to who they are, not what they are, right? Like we were all, like I was saying before, we were already reaching levels of acceptance, right? Like, I wasn't discriminated against based off of my color, or whatever. I know plenty of people who are gay or whatnot that are able to live their lives openly and freely, where just like 20 years beforehand, 30 years beforehand, they wouldn't be able to do that, right? Like, in terms of like cultural acceptance, we were reaching like that leveling off point, that point where just like people were just like culturally and like legally like equal, right? And as far as like the stuff that you brought up, like with like the Brett Weinstein thing, like, yeah, like if he was saying that like children were being groomed, yeah, well, he wasn't exactly wrong. Yes, there are children that are like that like have parents or have adults in their lives that are pushing them towards like these life altering decisions that they should only be making as adults. And yeah, that is grooming, and there has been a push for that, and it is fucked up, and it only sets things back for people who are legit trans. All right, so I get your point. Like, a lot of stuff that you're pointing out is Nazism is basically just like regular status assholes being reactionary, right? Like the ones that are actually legit white supremacists, there aren't, and as far as I'm aware, there aren't any prominent white supremacists within the U.S. government. And at the end of the day, the problem is that the problem is that the government exists and it is authoritarian, and we should be focusing on that. We keep on talking about systemic structures of like of discrimination based off of our intersectional traits. No, we have a system of oppression that's just farming all of us for resources and power. Like, we should be dealing with like the state and stop getting hung up on this freaking sectarian tribalist fucking nonsense. Like we're focusing on the wrong thing. Like, the whole intersectionality thing, it's a literal fucking waste of time. Like, if you see a person that's in need, just help them. Not because they tick some certain demographic check mark, but because they're a good person and they deserve help. It's just as simple as that. Like, and if we just keep on making it about like all these tags and handles of identity, a lot of stuff gets lost in the sauce. Like racism is judging people worth their moral status based off of their race. Like sexism is judging someone's moral worth based off of their sex, and so on and so forth. So instead of like harping over and obsessing over these things and fetishizing them and LARPing as like freedom fighters for like civil rights that we legally already kind of have, let's just deal with the fact that we still have the government's boot on all of our necks and just help each other based off of like our work as individuals. I don't really like if you're asking when is it equal enough, when is we progress enough, when stuff like race and sex and sexuality is no more important than hair color, right? That's when we've arrived. And we were getting pretty close to that point until like all of this crazy shit started happening, and it set us back and is giving fodder to like freaking reactionary assholes that want to push in an opposite extreme direction that's just as bad. Like we just need to just get our head straight and just get back to the basics and just judge your people based on their character and start pushing things like the non-aggression principle and opposing top-down coercive government. Get rid of the state. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say for that for now.
So, because Kimani has to book soon, we'll keep responses to what he just said to 2 minutes. We'll go Bigfoot, Rose, Bread, and then me.
All right. So my response to what Kimani said, and in general to what you were saying earlier, Jeremy, is this. I agree with your, speaking to Jeremy, I agree with your idea of keeping eyes open to systemic oppression, because I absolutely believe that there are opportunities and different periods in history where being something allowed you to become an oppressed in a way that the common society would not notice because they had been trained out of empathy for that group of people. For instance, there's literally an ethnicity that comes from Russia called the Slavs, who were slaves for so long that that is their ethnic name. And society just moved on as normal because that was just what they were, and they were trained by their state to see it that way. I see the general propagation, though, of the term woke as being corrupted, because I generally think that sectarian, population-based fights, like, picking an enemy of society and attacking them from the state's perspective, is something that they've done for a very long time. And it could be wokes or anti-wokes today. It could be communists of the 50s. It could be royalists of the 1776 times. It's somebody somewhere who is your enemy, who you should hate more than the man who's stealing your money. And I feel like any time the state participates in language, like, for instance, having been in the military, I know that a lot of DEI stuff was being implemented as I left. And if that's the case, then the state's not using it to forward, your rights. It's using it to basically create a monopoly of justice for itself based off of one arbitrary measurement after another throughout time. That's my view of it. I think that woke is not a good term to use anymore because it has been corrupted and destroyed by the state, as opposed to words like anarchy, which can't be corrupted by the state, because even if they make it sound like it's chaos, like, you can't define what anarchy is as the archist. That's like saying that, a racist defines what a black man is. That's pretty stupid. But anyway, that's my point.
All right, Rose, Bread, then I'll go 2 minutes.
Well, anarchy is a much older term, too, so it's probably a little harder for them to demonize it, though they still do. So I'm going to agree with Kimani. I think, smash the state, because the state, I think, again, most of these problems that we're talking about, these systemic injustices, can be traced back to the state. Everything from, redlining to, the drug war to what we're currently seeing with the scapegoating of trans people, as, being some kind of, there's some trans agenda or LGBT agenda to tear apart Western civilization by making our kids, confused about their gender so they won't want to start families of their own, whatever the hell the current narrative is. Like, this is all being pushed by the state to keep people divided. And also, or in the instance of things like the drug war, it was to feed the prison industrial complex, ensure a steady stream of slave labor, because the prison system, of course, is just a massive loophole in the prohibition on slavery. Or, things like redlining or exclusionary zoning regulations, those were also being used to, keep people that the state considered undesirable from, getting ahead. So again, like so much of this, if we could just, reduce the influence of the state in our lives, a lot of these adversarial positions would, I think, would, if not disappear, they would be a lot less problematic. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Bread.
All right. Well, I want to start out by saying that queer youth are extremely valid. I do not really give a shit what anybody else's opinion here is. Y'all are valid, and you need to not listen to people who are trying to tell you that you're not. Youth begin to develop their gender identity at 3 years old. To tell youth that they do not know themselves as well as you do is crap. And to call trying to actually give real education to people grooming is also crap, especially since binary is not, gender is not binary. Gender is a bimodal distribution, and y'all are trying to use fake biology to teach kids about a binary gender that doesn't fucking exist. Y'all are grooming children. You need to stop. If I had my way, we would just teach them everything and let them choose. And that's actually what's trying to happen here. People are trying to actually give education to people that was not available to begin with. It is not confusing the children. It is not grooming the children. It is offering education that has been hidden from them, that has been hidden from you. Otherwise, you wouldn't say these things. On top of that, I need to tell a little story. So back in the day when wokeism became a bad thing and it started to rise, they were using that terminology to try and convince people that Nazis aren't real and that we don't have any Nazis in America and that there are no Nazis in the government. We have Christian nationalists in the government using dog whistles in their online Twitter PFPs to fucking signal to their fascist brothers. You can not use the word Nazi if you want. You can call it fascist. I don't give a shit what you call it. You can call it tulips. It's still the same damn thing. And to not acknowledge that we have fascism in this country or that this country is a fascist nation by our system, by our government, makes you the biggest fool and the weakest link. We have been, as free folk, we have fought fascism since anarchy has existed. And to be able to educate each other about what to look for and what to see and how to defend it is extremely important. And in order to stop all of that, they use this woke bad, they're all crazy shit to convince people on the right, even anarchists and minarchists, that fascism is not real and it is not a threat. And now they're eating up their parties. They're eating up their spaces. They have destroyed entire fucking movements. You have got to be kidding me. We have billboards on the street here that fucking advertise white supremacy radio. They do conventions, KKK conventions. There is a thing called fascist unity, where fascists who have never worked together in the past are now coming together to work. You are a fool. You're just a fool.
And what I'll say, and I'll start off, because I'm going to try to keep my shit to 2 minutes, and then I know Kimani's got a book, and then we can continue the conversation generally after that. Because, and we'll also potentially do a sequel if Kimani, has things that he feels are unaddressed on his own side after this. But I'll say what I'm going to say. I'll try to keep it to 2 minutes. And then Kimani can, I guess, give a closing statement, because I think you got a book really soon. So I'm going to try to give you as much time to give a closing statement as possible. Yeah. 2 minutes, I'll say, and then we'll continue the conversation as long as, Rose, Bigfoot, and Brett want to go. So generally, the thing that I want to start off with to really emphasize my 2 minute banger sesh here is Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida, and he literally had campaign materials with the Sonnenrad from Nazi Germany, from his DeSantis War Room campaign staff and other Nazi symbols in an anti-trans ad. The rise of Nazi Germany was partially punctuated by anti-trans bigotry, lying about the Hirschfeld Institute grooming children, among other things. And the huge amounts of Nazis do support American politicians, some of whom are just Nazis in ideology, even though they wouldn't call themselves that, because they say exactly what Nazis would say. For instance, Greg Abbott wanting to pardon the guy who murdered Garrett Foster. Because that guy wanted to murder Black Lives Matter protesters. He already said that in text messages and so many other things. And then he drove against a red light into a crowd of protesters and murdered one of them for standing with a gun he was legally open carrying and never pointed at him. That's what the video proves. And, denying that, there are a huge amount of white supremacists in office when Greg Abbott exists, putting razor wire in the water to throw families into and acting like that's a human rights issue is authentically insane. White supremacists are everywhere in charge. And also, the Brett Weinstein thing, I have an entire thread on that thing, and he was a liar. So was Jimmy Dore. So was Kurt Metzger. They were lying. No, he was not accurate in what he was saying, and in fact, the truth is much more friendly to the idea of trans children than you want to imply without ever actually watching the stream. I advise you watch their stream as well, everybody here, and I'll include a link to that stream somewhere in descriptions and shit. But Brett Weinstein was not, in fact, right, just because it confirms something in your present agenda. I would advise against saying that he's right about something you haven't heard him say. Huge amount of anti-trans bills, basically nothing that targets cis people. We are not all equally oppressed. The government is actively targeting these people and being helped by people like DeSantis' campaign and a huge amount of other anti-woke motherfuckers. And finally, I'll say that this idea that you won't be profitable if you aren't doing DEI seems like a wild subversion of get woke, go broke, because it's basically saying it's the opposite of true, and in fact, not being woke makes you broke. That makes zero sense, especially claiming that somehow acceptance is set back, yet somehow it's mandatory and omnipresent. I don't think so. I don't think any of that tracks. So I will give you until you have to leave to respond, and then we can go Bigfoot, Bread, Rose, me.
Right. So as far as the ESG stuff and everything, it doesn't determine how much you're getting from your customers. A lot of these things that companies are doing in order to get that ESG is actually killing their revenue in terms of the actual customer base. The pressure that the institutional pressure that's being leaned on them is their access to investment capital. Not so much a lot of them are losing business, a lot of stuff the entertainment industry or what have you, or whatever other businesses that you have, they get on board with this and they basically get strong armed into it and say, hey, look, either you make sure you get your corporate credit score up according to these check marks and criteria, or you're not going to be able to have access to this investment capital. So it's not about they can't make money from their customers and everything. Well, they're basically running scared that they're not going to be able to get investment to maintain their business from that. So it creates an artificial market distortion by this we're going to invest this large sum of money if you do this thing that's going to actually alienate you from your actual customers. So a lot of companies are going on board with this. Some of them are kind of trying to resist it. But at the end of the day, the institution of those policies and those companies are literally just discriminatory practices. It's just literal discriminatory practices with friendly language put on it. Now, as far as the whole kids thing, I don't even care if it's just regular heteronormative stuff like that. There's certain things that those kids shouldn't be exposed to. You should be sexualizing kids and talking about what sexuality they're supposed to be or they want to be. Just let them be freaking kids, and then once they get past adolescence and start approaching adulthood, help them figure that out then. But don't just get them as kids and just oh well, we're gonna make these permanent medical changes to you, and we're going to influence you down that direction. Just like, no, just leave them be and let them figure it out. And when they're adults, they can make that decision for themselves. That's not freaking genocide. That's literally just like not manipulating and grooming kids, right? Just like don't try to sexualize little kids. It's fucked up. And like I said, like that's causing a lot of backlash and overreaction towards like legit trans people. Another issue is this push biological men into women's spaces in the name of equality, and literally like gaslighting and like harassing women that way. Like that's fucked up, and it's only setting back the trans cause. Like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with someone like, all right, I identify as the opposite sex, and I want to live my life that way. That's fine. It's whatever. If somebody's an adult, it's their right to do that, right? But at the same time, you don't just like try to like upend the rest of society and aggress on other people just so you can feel like you're accepted and safe. That's kind of twisted. Now, as far as like the whole Nazi white supremacy thing, like I see this kind of trend where people just like anybody who's like that has opinions that I don't like and is in a position of power, therefore Nazi. Like a Nazi is a specific ideological strain. It isn't just like a Christian nationalist. That's a yeah. At the end of the day, it's all just authoritarianism. Whether it's like Marxist, Leninist, Christian authoritarian, or like freaking fascist or whatever, it's just all authoritarianism and just kind of fetishizing like one particular form of authoritarianism and ignoring any others that just happen to agree with like a certain cultural issue that you agree with. Like it's kind of dumb. Like we should just be against like government statism in principle. And like I said, my concern isn't so much like white supremacy because I don't see that on the ascendancy. Maybe at some point it will be if they cause enough, like trigger enough reactionaries to go overboard with this and get like a lot of dumb normies on board with it because of more of the excesses of people calling themselves woke. Like it's crazy on both sides of that. But right now, the active portion of that are people that are like pushing agendas supposedly in the name of marginalized people that's making things work for those groups in society in general. But anyway, I got to dip off, guys. It was a nice chat. Maybe we can have like another part to this. Catch you later.
All right, be well. So we'll go to Bigfoot, then Bread, then Rose.
Yeah. So basically, my perspective in this is that So basically, I look at it like this: throughout human history, there have been many different groups and many different other groups that have been otherized and attacked and made, into targets of aggression through common people thinking that they're doing the best. One example comes to mind is the Bacon's Rebellion in, I believe it was 1645 or roughly around that time. I forget his first name, but he's like a distant relative of the Francis Bacon. He started a revolution in the early colonial America, I believe it was in Virginia, specifically because the governor refused to allow an offensive war on the Indians. He was a bigot. He hated Indians. And he immediately threw his, entire life towards the process of committing a total genocidal war on the Indians of Virginia. So much so that he declared independence from the colony of Virginia and Britain entirely as a method of proacting this war. 1 second.
All right.
Sorry, I was interrupted by my child. Anyway, so Jesus, I can't have a quiet spot in my house. So basically, I see modern day attacks on individual liberties of all kinds. From what I consider to be the prepper idea of liberty, where it's like, I want to be by myself in the woods, I want to be left alone, collect my own rainwater, stuff like that, to more metropolitan ideas of liberty, avoiding societal oppression or targeting by a police force, things like that. All of these things are effectively tools that the state can use to otherize a group in order to direct your aggression against someone who is not them. I feel like all of these movements had some sort of legitimate basis, or at least they could have had some sort of legitimate basis. I don't know if in specific, if like the first instance of an anti-woke person was a grifter or not, or actually believed what he said and had any principles or not, don't really care. My point is that while all of these terms and all of these positions could come from a position of good faith, trying to get rid of what they see as tyranny. They're all being used in the modern day to turn us against each other, as opposed to the actual oppressor who's actually oppressing you. It's not an anti-woke grifter that's preventing you from changing your gender on your driver's license. It's the state that makes you get a driver's license that causes you to cry every morning when you look at it. Like, it's not a woke grifter who made you lose your job at the mega corporation because you said the wrong thing under your breath. It's the state who made you lose your job by telling that company that if they didn't fire you, they would be sued for human rights violations because you said a word that was fine 5 years ago. I'm not even specifying. I'm just, saying in general. I feel like the hyperfixation on a specific target, on a specific side of authoritarianism, like Kimani said, is the quickest way to allow the other side to come up behind you and stab you in the back every single time. When you see a global corporation supporting something publicly, it's not something that is trying to encourage your liberty. That goes for the anti-woke grift. Like all of these, like fucking Black Rifle Coffee is a bastard, and all these other companies that are trying to jump on the anti-woke grift just to make money off of people who have no principle. And you have the woke grift, like rainbow capitalism, and like my favorite instance is when Bethesda changed its graphic to LGBT colors in every country except for the one that would get mad at them. Yeah, that's when you really know they have principle. So I basically feel like this woke, anti-woke puppet show is effectively a new generation of a method of dividing the community, which in reality, if they could meet in person and actually see each other, would not have so much not in common. They would be more amenable to come together if it wasn't for their divisions constantly being stoked. That's my perspective.
Bread, take as long as you need. We don't have time restrictions now.
Okay, I have notes. I'm not real happy. I hate to be a dickhead, but I'm gonna fucking plainly state that almost everything that came out of that other person's mouth was nothing but regurgitated statist right-wing propaganda. That's where it was born. That's where it was raised. And that is where it has come from and where it stays. And those who speak that way, those, and this is hitting back at Rose too, because like when you were like, I don't think it's 9 out of 10 people, the truth is, it is. Just because someone doesn't know they're a bigot does not mean they are not doing bigoted things. It does not mean that they are not serving the bigot's cause and pushing things along. And even, I mean, just because someone doesn't know something is fucked up doesn't magically make it not fucked up. And the fact that the anti-woke grift is actually causing people to reject education in these fronts and to deny the fact that there is a problem at all is a huge problem. Huge. And to hit on Road on here, Appalachian, like, just because there are grifts, and that makes it difficult because the statists are trying to prey upon marginalized fights, they're not aiding marginalized fights. They are not aiding them at all. There is no woke movement helping marginalized people. There are progressive people, individuals, doing individual fights in grassroots and all out there. And then there are corporativists, pink corporativists, false corporativists that are pretending to make a fucking, like, they actually pretend to give a shit and they make a huge profit. That go woke, go broke shit, the reason why it's fucking over companies. Let's talk about Bud Light. Bud Light decided they were going to appeal to queer people. And that exploded and made the anti-wokers lose their minds and stop buying their beer, which is really funny thing there is that Bud Light dropped from the top thing, and the thing that took its place was owned by the same company that owns Bud Light. They didn't lose shit. Also, they then tried to appeal to the right with another fucking campaign, and because they were already so angry, everybody had turned on them. And that was when they lost money. The same thing happened to Target. Target appealed to the rainbow corporativism, and then the right got mad, so they tried to appeal to them, and the rainbows got mad, and now everybody hated them. They took some dives. They're still there though. Disney is an excellent example. Disney has a controlling hand in Fox Media and Fox News, which has been one of the strongest pushers of the anti-woke grift. While Disney over there is pushing the pink capitalism up everybody's ass in oodles of rainbows and pretending like they actually care, they are making money off of the fear and need of these marginalized individuals while also making money off of creating their fear and doing literally nothing to fucking help it. And if anybody thinks that Disney and the far right are not on the same fucking page, how about we talk about how recently they dropped all of their fucking cases against Florida's governor and decided to sit down and find something that works for everybody. Yeah, I wonder why. Probably because they want to continue to be able to make money off of both sides of the grift. Now, this grift is actually hurting marginalized people by causing people like Appalachian to say, well, because it's so polarized and people are misusing it, we need to avoid it and just do the basic stuff, which means those marginalized people in those real fights out there are actually being turned away from because people are buying into the culture war and turning away from the real fights. That is horrible. That is being manipulated by the state. That is doing their work for them. So, like, I think that that's a huge fucking problem. Also, another huge problem, I need y'all to stop sexualizing gender. There's nothing sexual about gender. Rose, what do you identify as?
What was that?
What do you identify as? What do you identify as?
I'm a woman.
Was that a sexual question?
No.
Did that make you feel like I was asking you a sexual question? Yeah, I didn't think so. We need to stop sexualizing gender. Teaching people that there is more than just two genders is not grooming someone sexually. That is the most ridiculous thing that I have ever fucking heard. And it's indicative of the rape culture that runs this goddamn nation. They sexualize clothing. They sexualize children. They sexualize genitals. They sexualize gender. They sexualize words. They sexualize colors. They sexualize everything. And then they wonder why our communities are so ill. Because we're not allowed to do anything without it being sexualized. Me wearing clothes that are against the gender norms is being sexualized. Like, I don't get to choose if me wearing this is sexualized. I really cannot stand it when people try to downplay the whole, oh, we just don't want men in women's bathrooms. Okay, well, y'all do want people like me in women's bathrooms because the state decided arbitrarily that I was female when I was born. And it was literally from just looking at me and saying, oh, they have a vagina. They had no idea that I had other things going on. We didn't know anything about my gender stuff until much later. So they just looked at there, saw a vagina and went female and didn't think about what was going on inside. It is an arbitrary decision. And I'm very lucky because a lot of the fucking intersex kids out there and stuff like that, they don't actually check to see what's going on with the look at what you've got on the outside and make a choice based off of what is simpler for them to do. And then they mutilate the intersex child and force them to fit into this fake binary in order to fucking save binary people the trouble of having to fucking figure out something that's slightly gray. And it's bullshit. People are out there screaming that we're like mutilating children, and that's not a thing that happens. There are some older teens who are being able to get permission to do like their hormone therapy and stuff like that. What we're trying to give kids is a thing called hormone blockers. And if you don't understand hormone blockers, then you shouldn't fucking talk about them because they have been approved for use with kids since the fucking 70s. People have been using it for all sorts of shit with kids since the 70s, and it doesn't have a problem. You stop giving it to them, they have puberty. Puberty then happens. It's not irreversible. That's all a bunch of lies. It's literally a lie. All they do is say lies. And my problem with the anti-woke crowd is that it's not just anti-wokeness. They never come with, oh, I just don't like wokeness. I'm really based otherwise. No. They always come with extra lies. They always come with extra propaganda, and it all comes from statist wombs, statist brain wombs. Statist brain worms are having statist brain wombs, and they are spewing this stuff into these people's minds. And yeah, being anti-woke does kind of make you a bigot, because just because you don't know what wokeness is, you're going along with it. You didn't fucking look it up, and you're an idiot and a tool. If you don't look shit up, if you don't learn about the things before you post them, if you don't look at who you're posting before you post them, if you don't learn about something before you make a statement as if you're a fucking expert, this is your fault. It's on you. Your ignorance is no excuse. It's out there. We have a whole giant internet. A whole giant internet.
Yep.
I think that's it. I'm so sick of people sexualizing gender. It's such a ridiculous idea. I have to be physically guarded so that I can take a shit in public.
And all because, like, intersex, and people don't understand that even exists or how that manifests.
Yeah, and I guarantee it's not going to make people comfortable to look up and see me in the bathroom if they don't want men in the bathroom with them, and they don't want me in there either. I think gender is stupid. I'm an anti-gender person. I don't believe in gender. I think we should abolish it. Socially, not by the state, but it's ridiculous. It's just, all of this is ridiculous. Anybody who joins this anti-woke movement is literally just throwing in with the statist right. And I have zero respect for that.
Rose, you can take as long as you want.
So, well, I actually wanted to comment on the, idea that there's grooming going on, because, this is another thing that you frequently hear brought up, that there's either some agenda to make kids, question their gender identity or whatever. So, I'm saying this as the parent of a teenager who, as a matter of principle, I don't normally talk about my family members, but I will say this, so there are a couple members of my kids' friends group who are trans. 2 to 3 years ago, every single member of her friends group was identifying as, trans or non-binary or something. I think, what's going on is simply, trans people and LGBT people are being talked about a lot. So you have kids who are, just going through normal, developmental changes, questioning, trying to figure out who they are and what they are. And, a lot of them think, okay, I might be this, and then, they quickly figure out that they're not. So I think this is where the whole idea of grooming is coming from. It's just, kids going through normal, changes and normal questioning and figuring out of their identity. And there are people thinking, oh, clearly, they're being groomed in some way, or they wouldn't be questioning their identity. This is nothing new. It's got a name now, but this is nothing new. Like when I was, a kid, I would, try on, male identities, and I would, imagine, okay, what if I was actually a boy? These are all very normal things. Now it just has a name. Kids will say, rather than just saying, what if I was a boy? Kids will say, maybe I'm non-binary or something. And this is kind of where the idea of grooming is coming from. Most of the time, kids, they eventually outgrow whatever, crisis they're going through. They, realize they develop, a more static identity. And I think that's what's going on. So there'll be kids who realize, okay, maybe I'm not trans, maybe I'm not non-binary. Then there are kids for whom, that it does stick. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the matter.
So what I'll say in response to that, and then I'll throw it to Bigfoot, and then Brett again, and then you. The first thing is, I was pretty frustrated with the responses of Kimani, and maybe rewatching this will enable the next stream to go better in a more constructive direction, because a lot of what Kimani was doing was not elaborating on the responses that people gave him, but specifically just repeating the same shit that he said before. while not acknowledging what had been said that might like disprove or contradict that in some way. And then having the audacity to say to somebody that routinely opposes tankies, myself, that I'm ignoring other forms of statism because I go against Nazis is fucking absurd. Pretending that Nazis haven't had a resurgence because it's a German ideology, that's always such a dog shit coward argument. It's absurd. No, it's not a German ideology. National Socialism could apply to a variety of different ideologies, and the fact that somebody isn't German doesn't change fucking shit. That's just a lie. The idea that it's just an obscure German ideology that's faded from view is just simply untrue. It's not true. The thing Kimani said is untrue. And it's demonstrably untrue by something he avoided addressing entirely, which is a very prominent Florida governor reposting a very popular video made by a campaign staffer of his saying "Make America Florida" by turning the seal of Florida into that with a Sonnenrad in the background and troops in front of DeSantis at a podium, and this being the font of an anti-trans like hit piece that says he's like doing all this shit against the trans people and he promises to finish Trump's border wall. And this is the face of modern fascism, and DeSantis was popular enough that Trump had a real run for his money for a bit until people realized that DeSantis wears shoe extensions and is probably not that authentic a person. Let's be super real here and say that the problem is bad enough that Nick Fuentes can have an American rally. Let's say that the problem is bad enough that things like the Unite the Right rally could take place. Let's say the problem is bad enough that routinely clashes with the Proud Boys still take place, and Patriot Front is a new fascist organization, and plenty of fascist organizations exist in order to form the basis for massive authoritarian right-wing marches, speeches, and more. Let's be very specific and say that the problem is here. The problem is real. That the problem is happening in exactly, and I can't stress this enough, the same way that it happened in Nazi Germany. Starting with minorities, starting with art, starting with culture, starting saying that, good men, strong men created good times, and now these weak men are who took over the world, taking advantage of our kindness and our largesse and our, they're creating these bad times, and now we've got to crush them or the wokes will win, and this will be a weak culture that will be crushed by the strong cultures of it's the same shit. And it's involving the same sort of book-burning bullshit that comes out when Nazi Germany came out, saying that you can't tell people because they're of a certain age about certain gender things. That's never going to work for people. It's never going to make people, in these camps, not think that they're being oppressed, because they're being oppressed. They're being oppressed by laws that are coming out, bills that are coming out, politicians that are using them as scapegoats, boogeymen, and punching bags. They're being oppressed. And not just trans people, but black people as well, with Black Lives Matter consistently being the butt of jokes. And any sort of black uprising movement consistently being downtrodden by the state. Not just them, but any migrant coming over here automatically being treated like shit, even though the primary reason for these migrants coming over here is the policies of these fucking governments that they're going to. That's the font of modern fascism, and it should be no surprise, additionally, that font of modern fascism is coming alongside people like the rise of popularity of Andrew Tate, who literally actually groomed a child, and used her as the basis for his sex trafficking operation after he pedophilically fucked her at the age of 17. That is the real groomer threat. The groomer threat of Nick Fuentes, who is a Nazi who says 15-year-olds are his ideal. He wants an untouched, pristine, innocent 15-year-old girl. Once he's 30, he's the real groomer threat. His followers are the real groomer threats, and they're also really Nazis, despite not being German. So the fact is that like these threats overlap, and the intersectionality and understanding thereof of the overlapping threats is necessary in order to thoroughly oppress it. You can say that we should oppose the state, and the people that are being called woke would probably agree with you and say, that's what I'm doing by going against this system that is trying to crush me and my people and destroy my liberty. That's what they're doing. So to tell these people you should really be opposing the state while not listening to them that they're doing exactly that is going to lose you people. It's going to make you their enemy when you could be unifying with them against the state. And in doing so, in rejecting this intersectionality and saying, no, in fact, there's no structures of oppression, much less like intersecting groups of like strains of oppression that we could all unite based on, well, what the fuck are they supposed to unite based on then? Because if you're not going to say that there's any given reason for them and their personal demographic to be invested in the struggle, what the fuck reason do they have to invest a significant amount of risk and time in their lives into something? You should involve them on the basis of where they have felt rightly oppressed, and this is an area in which they have felt rightly oppressed by a variety of people. And just to, clear the air on this, the research shows desistance is low. And the research shows from a study of 27,715 adults tracked from childhood that the risk of suicide reduced following gender-affirming hormone therapy to 0.0001%, less than that. And the study of 34,759 LGBTQ plus youth is that risk of suicide following gender-affirming hormone therapy reduced to below 0.001%. So, like, trans individuals have brains that more resemble their preferred sex. That's another study. All of these are coming from very reputable journals. And when it comes down to the actual science, not the basic biology, but the advanced biology, it comes down to like realizing the actual experimentative proofs that desistance rates are low. A lie that Brett Weinstein and Jimmy Dore told is that they weren't. That people who regret it are low. And that acceptance rates being higher is part of the reason, because people don't treat them like shit because of who they are and what they did in order to affirm their gender. And if we want those rates to remain low, desistance, suicidality, mental health issues, etc., then we have to have a culture of acceptance, and that means not immediately rejecting somebody because they sound too woke. It's absurd. If people really want unity, if people really want to unite against the state, great. The state is against these minorities. The state uses these minorities as pawns. The state is evil in this regard and on the opposite side of trans people. The wokes don't control everything. It's a fascist tactic to say that they're simultaneously the weakest people and also the biggest threat. So I'll say that, and then what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to kick it to Rose first, because she seems like she has quite a lot to say. And, and then I'll kick it
if you didn't mind, could I just say something short? Because I have to leave.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted to make a closing statement, and then I've got a jet. So basically, I've said most of how I feel about it, and I still feel like there is a larger historical picture that's being missed by a lot of people when it comes to this conversation on both sides. And I'm always the person who argues for like, well, back in 1400s, humans did this, and it's very similar to what we're doing now. So maybe we should take a listen to that. It's me all the time. But basically, what I want to say is that I really do think the painting of everyone who considers themselves anti-woke, or the saying that 9 out of 10 people are bigots or stuff like that, that is very sectarian and is definitely like, even if you want let me say it like this: there are plenty of people that I've met who would consider anti-woke to be a perfectly benign and accurate phrase to use to describe themselves, who are not bigots, who are not anti-trans people, not anti-women's liberation, not anti-LGBT issues. My wife is literally non-binary Although she generally identifies as a woman, she sometimes identifies as a man, and it's rare, but it's as it is. She, like, herself doesn't consider herself to be woke. She considers herself to be relatively anti-woke because she disagrees with using any sort of coercive power to instill any sort of morality on anyone. She thinks that the only way to justifiably fight for liberation of LGBT people is through voluntary convincing of, people of the justice of treating everybody equal and stuff like that. And honestly, I generally toss these sorts of questions up to her because we're an anarchist unit, more or less. She's more lib left, I'm more lib right, but we equalize to be lib center, like absolutely 100% black flag anti-state. And I accept anybody else's opinions of anarchism in general, but I feel like painting an entire side of people based off of the worst examples is one of the worst things you can do in a conversation like this, because there will always be bad examples on your side, and you will always be attempting to backfoot as people say, well, what about this guy or that guy or this person? And it's like, well, if we're just going to point out the negativity in each community, we're just going to continue this fight, as opposed to find some sort of common ground that respects everybody's right to be at liberty and not to be oppressed.
Let me ask you before
Anyway.
you leave, what is that middle ground? Who is an example of somebody who does not accept sort of a more woke interpretation of trans people, sort of an intersectional approach to this sort of thing? Who is that more middle grounded person that you think is a good representative? Because if you can't think of an example of somebody who, like, is on the other side from woke, that still, like, and I'm talking like big figures here that run significant segments of culture. If you can't think of somebody on the anti-woke side that you think is a better representative of the anti-woke position, then that's a failure of them, not us.
He's not an anarchist, and I hate him for that, but he is almost entirely, like, based on his anti-woke takes. And when I say based, I mean based as in a liberty perspective, not as in a right-wing perspective. It's I would say short, fat otaku. He is very positive in terms of trans, like, people. He is, very friendly with trans people. In fact, one of his closest friends is trans, and he still maintains a very strong and principled anti-woke grifting perspective. But he doesn't use woke grifting specifically. He just calls it woke because, in his own words, he once was a radical leftist. He went through the college courses. He learned about diversity, inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion before it was even, out of a college. He, like, had it in his class. And he was like, I was a full believer at one point, but then I came to the position that there are some injustices involved with it inherently that I couldn't agree with. But he's definitely not a rightist, because he generally still falls under left principles and maintains that, trans people deserve all the rights that everyone else deserves and stuff like that. So I would say that he's a good representative of a non-rightist, anti-woke person. But in general, I don't know. I feel like the conversation gets too focused on famous people and not focused enough on regular people, if that makes any sense.
Well,
but
sure.
Anyway, I've got to get going.
Well, I hope you join us for the threequel to this, because I'm almost guaranteeing that there's so much that people will have left unsaid or that they want to address. So there will be a third one of these.
I'll try.
Yeah. So thank you for coming. And
No problem.
We'll be wrapping this up soon, I guess, because dwindling. Be well.
Yeah, I
Oh,
don't have
thank you.
a ton of time, but
So, all right, I'm gonna kick it to Rose and then Brett.
right. So to kind of elaborate on what he meant when he was talking about middle ground, like, I think there are a lot of people who are generally open-minded, but some, maybe they're from older generation, or they just haven't, or they're from, more insulated or conservative communities who just don't quite get it. Like, maybe they're generally open to things like marriage equality, but I interact with them all the time, people who I don't think have ever met a trans person. So all they know about trans people are, what they see, like, from highly publicized, say, trans rights activists or something. They just don't quite get it. So they may not understand, okay, why is it that, why are we having this debate over bathrooms? Why are we having these debates over, women's sports? But I guess, like, I just worry that we might be too quick to label people as, bigots, or label them as being, having fallen for the anti-woke grift, when they may still, be salvageable. They're just not quite, where we are yet. If that makes any sense. Because he mentioned middle ground, or you asked, where is their middle ground, between being accepting and, being a bigot. And yeah.
So, kick it to Bread.
Well, honestly, I think that it's very easy for people who aren't queer to think that everyone who's anti-woke is not a bigot. However, I deal with this on a daily basis. And yes, it is very rare that someone who says anti-woke or uses the rhetoric of the statist right does not treat me like I am inhuman, does not dehumanize me and everyone around me. So it's not sectarian to say 9 out of 10 of the people that I talk to about anti-wokeism turn out to be shitty and horrible people. It's reality, and it is self-defense. I am not going to pretend that what happens to me every goddamn day is not happening just because somebody doesn't think it is. That's some bullshit, and it's not just me. All of us are dealing with this consistently. And I know Jeremiah has seen some of the stuff that people say to me on a daily fucking basis. And several of them were people who pretended that they were my friends for many years until it was okay to say this shit. Until their base would allow them to say this shit without losing their fucking money. So no, it's not sectarian. It's realistic. And queer people who are trying to go around people who are like right free folk and shit, you have to approach them with care. You have to approach them with caution. You need to stay strapped. Because a lot of the people out there are buying into statist rhetoric, and they are doing everything they can to excuse it and protect it so that they don't have to fucking actually look for real facts. They can continue to search for their own bias confirmation. It's not that this is new. It's not that they just suddenly developed these things. They found out that it was okay to say it, and so they say it now, which is actually kind of like what's happening with them being like, oh, everyone's trans now suddenly. Everyone's trans now. It's social contagion, which is bullshit. That doesn't exist, first off. Second off, we're not new. We didn't suddenly just exist. The fact is that right now we actually have access to more information and treatment and education, and you're not supposed to shoot us. To be fair, if you do, there's a really strong chance that no one's going to look at this. And there are places in this world right now, in this nation that we're in, that consider gay panic as an acceptable reason for acting violently and lethally for self-defense.
Yeah, you had a gun pointed at your face, right?
I've had several guns pointed at my face. I've been spit on in public. I've had people try to swerve at me. I have people in the bathrooms. I'm trying to go into the bathroom to go take a shit, and they like grab their children dramatically and swing them almost abusively to keep them away from me. And I'm just trying to take a shit. My friends are so afraid for my safety that they will go with me into the bathroom and guard me because they're afraid someone's going to hurt me. And they're also afraid that someone will false witness on me. Because where I am, if I am dressed like a non-binary person, as I tend to be, and I go innocently to take a shit and someone decides that they don't like me, or that they're offended by my presence, or that my existence grooms their children, which is ridiculous. Existing in education is not fucking grooming. If it is, then y'all are grooming binary children with lies. And you need to stop. But like, seriously, these people, they could very easily just decide that they hate me because I'm trans and they're going to bear false witness against me and call the cops. And given my situation as a free folk and how I do not comply with the police, they'll get me killed. Like, I'm not going to be fun. I'm going to be like the back room of fucking, oh, I can't remember the name of the bar where Stonewall started. I'm tired. I'm going to be like the back room of that because they're going to be like, show me your genitals. I'm going to be like, don't be rapey. Don't be rapey. And you know what's going to happen.
Wasn't it the Stonewall Inn, though?
Forget it. I'm not fucking oppressed. I'm totally fine. I can do whatever I want. I have all the same rights as a cis white Christian male.
Yep.
That is the biggest load of fucking crap I have ever fucking heard. These people are completely unreasonable and they do no research. They literally they're hand-fed by media while saying, media lies, and they repeat it because it makes them feel good. And that's exactly what happened here today, too.
I'm pretty sure, by the way, it was just the Stonewall Inn.
I think you're right. You are probably... I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for those of you who expect me to be a huge an expert on all this. Sometimes when I'm stressed out, I forget. I have a hard time choosing vocabulary because of like some trauma stuff.
I'm fucking. Yeah. I've got the PTSD bullshit from a bunch of shit in my childhood, and I'm also bipolar, so I get it.
And you know.
But like, that's one of the things. I'm shit with names. Like I will forget somebody's name 2 minutes after they fucking say it, but I can remember that annoying detail about their life that they like revealed to me 2 years ago.
It's terrible. Oh my god, it's terrible.
I can remember conversations that I eavesdropped on in elementary school, like with names and like voice inflections and everything. I can't, remember like the dates and times of important meetings or appointments for shit though. Like I have to set reminders in my phone. I have to have it remind me every single day or I'll dismiss it.
Oh, and by the way, just because like I'm not sponsored by these people, if you want to sponsor me, Proton, please fucking do. But if you want a more secure way to like do your like appointments and scheduling shit, Proton Mail has an alternative to Google Calendar, so you can just use Proton Calendar. I use that for all my shit. It's double encrypted and based in I think Switzerland, and so go like Sweden actually. So go get your Proton Calendar. I am not sponsored by them. I will make zero money off saying that. I'm just saying that because it's a more secure way to keep your appointments that's less likely to be compromised by the feds. Who don't need to know your itinerary.
Sponsored by Proton Mail would say though.
No, it's because if I was, I would have to.
Sound like an advertisement.
If I was, I would have to say it's an ad, or I would get my channel shut down. YouTube itself has policies against that, so I'm not gonna fuck with that shit. Proton, if you're out there and you want a woke fucking like edgy anarchist in your fucking payroll, then feel free to throw me some skrill. But that's my.
I think you actually have to go sign up for their affiliate program. They just have an open sign up, and I don't think they actually just reach out like that anymore.
Well, I don't know. Like I didn't even know they had an affiliate program. If they do, I'll take it.
They do.
But either way, so I'm gonna say nothing. I'm gonna kick this back to Rose, and then I'll kick it back to Bread. I think Rose has to book at 7. So
I've lost the train of thought like 3 times now, but
no.
But so we'll keep responses limited to 4 minutes from Rose and then Bread.
Well, no, I actually I was wondering like so the people that have I was going to say like they always have the same response to it. What rights do I have that trans people or black people or whatever people don't have? Like it's always that same bad faith bullshit because they're asking technically, legally speaking, what rights do you not have? They're not taking into consideration the culture that has been created where like Brett was saying, people can't even use the bathroom without having to be concerned about their personal safety. Like that's a genuine issue. I actually wanted to ask though. So I wanted to ask Brad, like the people who, had pretended to be your friend, like Do you think that they were actually faking the whole time, or is there any possibility that they were fine with you and then the idea was planted, by, certain media or other circles that they were exposed to that, oh no, that person who, you were okay with actually, has been brainwashed and they're part of an agenda to groom people or what? Like, do you think they were actually faking the entire time? I mean,
I think that it depends on the person, because some of them were faking it and some of them were not. See, my issue is that, very relevant to this situation, I accidentally almost fell down the alt-right pipeline.
Me too.
Several years back. And I mentioned in passing a thing that had happened, and if I have time, can I tell that? Is that okay with y'all?
Yes.
I'll do it. I'll do it as quickly as I can.
Real quick though,
So,
before you get on that, I just want to say specifically, this is a tweet that was sent to Bread. It's a coordinated, unnatural, trans-Marxist depopulation / destabilization agenda, and we are tired of pretending it isn't. So
Yep.
Go. Sorry.
That is flat out a derivative of a full-on fascist ideal that has been passed. It was pushed by the Nazis too. When I, way back in the day, before I really came to my awesomeness that I am now, I started out as a leftist, a real leftist, not the fake left that these people were talking about earlier. That is not the radical left. I was part of the radical left. I'm not going to give any details on that. But when I was there, I was the crowd is full of liberals and tankies that are counterproductive to the cause, to the fight, to anything really. And at one point, I had not gotten angry enough with someone who had misgendered me, and two liberals got into a big fight with me about it. And it actually went physical, and I was assaulted. And because of that, I knee-jerked as far away from the left as I possibly could. And as I did that, I stumbled backwards into the arms of people who were like, wow, you're a very reasonable trans person because you ask questions. You're a very reasonable trans person because you don't yell at people and demand that we respect you.
One of the
because
good
I
ones.
already felt so bad and alone that I was willing to let these people, for a short period of time, play on the lines of disrespect on every fucking day. And every day they fed me a little bit more and a little bit more until the day I actually said to someone in one of my movements that it was okay that I, as a human, should not breed because I would just pass on the sickness that was inside of me and my genes. That is eugenics. When they tried to get me to move forward and apply that to other people, I went, that's Nazi shit, and flipped the table. And I also had people standing behind me, people from, surprisingly enough, the Boogaloo, which was full of queer people at the time. Teaching me the culture, teaching me what they had done. And if they hadn't been there teaching me all of this stuff that we want to teach kids, I would have fallen down that fucking hole. Because I didn't understand that they were playing a grift on me. And yes, some of them were fucking faking it. And they have come to show their fucking face now. Some of them, I don't think they were. I think that they were vulnerable. And their lack of education in the things that they say they fear and that they dislike made them a target, just like me. But instead of grabbing hold of the edges and putting their brakes on, they just slid right off the fucking side of the table. We have people who are known free folk who have been doing good work for a long time now, literally hosting Nazis in their spaces and praising the state for putting laws on trans people, like Jim Jesus. I used to fucking adore that man. I respected the shit out of him. He raised questions that made me question my fucking existence, and not in a bad way, in a good way. There was a moment when there was a jackknife, and I don't know exactly where it happened. They brought those statists into their spaces spewing their shit, and I went away for a little while, and when I came back, it was out of everybody's mouth. And I have friends that I worked with to push liberty for years and years, turned around and threatened to put me in a wood chipper threatened to come down here and end me because I'm a pedophile because I was born and I won't hide it. I won't pick a gender and stay in a lane that they decided was acceptable for me. And that doesn't sound like liberty at all. And it's not just the gender issue that's doing this. Everything that touches the polarized culture war is grabbing hold of free folk. Left free folk, right free folk, center free folk, posty free folk. It is grabbing hold of them one by one and pulling them, sucking them in to this culture war like it's a mosh pit that you lost track of. And it's terrifying. We are losing people every fucking day. Our community, MLTP, we lost somebody this week. We will continue to lose people if we don't fucking pull away from this, if we don't actively and if we don't take a moment to get educated about these culture war things in all directions and then find a way to invalidate them as a whole, we will continue to lose our own people. We will continue to lose free folk to the state. And that is exactly what they need because they are afraid. Do y'all know how many people do not participate in democracy now? They need us who do not participate in democracy to go back to participating in democracy. Almost fucking half the nation at this point. I'm not saying half the nation is free folk. I'm just saying half of the nation is tired of democracy. It doesn't work. It's mob rule. It doesn't serve anyone but the mob. Minorities will always be fucked in a fucking majority win situation.
So,
like, yeah, that's what I.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of both.
Yeah,
it's really fucking horrible.
I've seen people fall into, the various pipelines because they fell for some, culture war bullshit. Yeah.
Mises Caucus.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, when I joined, I thought I was joining the hardline, anti-imperialist, anti-Fed faction of the Libertarian Party that was going to fix the messaging and make it, not this boring ass, watered down, embarrassing version of libertarianism, so that if we had a party that had libertarian in its name, it at least might actually espouse libertarian values. When I joined, they said they weren't gonna get involved in the culture war shit. Now that did not last. So yeah, there's that. I mean, I got put on some guy's wood chipper list once. Like, I saw the writing on the wall a long time ago with the wood chipper memes, saying that they were going to throw pedos into the wood chipper. I'm like, okay, as entertaining as it is, like, the definition of what they're considering a pedo is way too broad. Yeah, I was right. Yeah, because then, like, I got into an argument with some guy in the libertarian group. I'm like, this whole idea of, drag shows for kids is just manufactured, media outrage. It's, witch hunt bullshit. And yeah, he's like, so he made some post putting me on blast, claiming that, I was advancing the groomer agenda, and that I was a groomer apologist and bullshit like that. And then he blocked me like the, pussy ass bitch he was. So, but like, yeah, I think I got enough people to go and, troll him after he'd blocked me that, I got, a screenshot, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like, and that's the thing. So I guess we'll sort of deliver closing statements, because I know Rose has got to book it at 7. So, let's deliver closing statements and try to keep them, like, I don't know, 3 minutes, and like really delve into, well, I guess 2 minutes because it's 53 already. And really delve into the key points you want as a takeaway.
Yeah, I feel like I've mostly said what I needed to, so if anyone else wants to go for it.
Yeah, and sorry, my internet just fucked up, so if I interrupted something.
I mean, I've already said pretty much everything that I feel like I need to say, aside from, like, just continue to watch each other. Spread the information and educate people whether they want to hear your shit or not. Don't let them silence you by telling you that you're being divisive. If the people on the other side of that division want something like bigotry or are supporting statist rhetoric, then it's okay. Divide the shit out of it. Get it the fuck out of your spaces. There are movements that I've been part of, including the Boog, that did not do that. And they lost everything that they fucking worked for. They had to burn and decentralize and start again. And now everything that you see on the surface on the internet, you have to be extremely careful because a lot of them are fascists or spreading fascist rhetoric or spreading statist right rhetoric, which is literally just fascist light. It's their fucking normie brigade that pushes people towards the right. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Watch each other's ass. Don't be fucking peer pressured to keep your mouth shut. If you see it, say it. And don't attack people immediately. Ask them questions first. Because like I said, not everybody knows they're being a bigot. Does it change the fact that they're free? No. Does it change the fact that they might not do it again? Yes. If we go out with our guns blazing at people right away off the bat, we're going to do just what the left did to me and push them into the arms of the alt-right or deeper into the arms of the alt-right. We have to be willing to stop and try to explain this stuff to people. Everybody gets a chance. When they double down, on the other hand, I get super nasty. So, I mean, don't double down with me if you're sensitive. But, like, yeah, we've got to work together. We've got to watch our butts. We've got to do mutual support and mutual defense with the education. We have got to spread this stuff. There are whole factions of free folk who don't believe fascism is real. And if you try to teach them about it, they just have a cow. And then you go to find out, hey, look, their whole fucking community is full of fucking authoritarian right and fascists and stuff. So be careful. Watch your houses. Clean your houses. Watch your brothers and sisters and non-binary pals' backs. We don't have friends in the enemy. There is no enemy of my enemy is my friend. We only have free folk.
Yep. And I will say, here's the thing. I used to be very fashy in high school. And when I started to think, when I started to ask questions, when I started to gauge whether or not my, expectations and ideology associated with certain mentalities that I had been expressing was consistent with the way either I would want to be treated or with the way, I think things should be, I decided, fuck no, it's not. And I ditched a lot of my ideas over the past, fucking 15 years that, were holding me back from a broader understanding of freedom. And one of the ideas that I really, needed to get rid of was the idea that we're somehow, dominantly controlled by commies, that we're controlled by the left, that the socialists are who run things, that we don't live under capitalism, that the capitalism is the free market, that all of these things, and all of those things are circumvented and short-circuited by people on the right, because they will then accuse you of being one of these woke liberals who doesn't understand economics and look at what they're doing to our kids. And they'll try to lump you together with the worst of the worst of the worst. Look, I have gone against trans pedophiles. And I have gone against non-trans pedophiles. I have gone against groomers on the right. And let me tell you, there are so fucking many more that aren't trans than are, that it is dizzying. And when people try to claim that trans people are groomers, it's the same thing as claiming black people are criminals. It's the same thing as claiming migrants are drug dealers. It's the same shit. It's attaching some label that would affix properly in the minds of a bigot to that person so that they can be safely otherized and demonized and turned as a subject to the state. The state relies on this shit. And so, for me, for my money, if somebody says we should be focusing on opposing the state without acknowledging these baseline truths that are real and very factual and provable and backable by science, statistics, reality, whatever, then I don't fucking care about their definition of fighting the state, because they're not going to fight the state on all the fronts that actually matter. And they're not going to get rid of the state until they are willing to acknowledge that these are components of it. So I think that the way to fight the state is to understand not only how individuals are oppressed within a statist framework, but also to expand that based on all of the little areas where that oppression overlaps and intersects. And intersectionality, by the way, not a dirty word. Intersectionality can apply to your job. Intersectionality can apply to your religion. Intersectionality can apply to your fandom. You know, intersectionality can apply to the social club that you're a part of in town that other people in town say needs to be run out. Not in my backyard kind of bullshit. Like, intersectionality is just looking at where oppression intersects and saying we will highlight these points of intersection and like try to oppose that in very targeted ways that could more accurately collapse the system that oppresses many people at once, rather than, you know, focusing on just individual cases and smacking these branches all the time. Intersectionality tries to hit roots, and that's not actually a fucking bad thing. And anybody who claims it is, anybody who claims that it's toxic, they're probably bought into authoritarian right-wing rhetoric, and they heard the term, they didn't think too much about it, and they would really actually probably support intersectionality if it helped them. For instance, the migrant, trans, black, etc., intersection of being disarmed. The gun-controlling statists want to disarm people, and they will always find a way to call trans people mentally ill, to call migrants criminals, to call black people, super predators that we need to bring to heel and throw against the wall. And if you keep this mentality that, hey, the state is going to use whatever excuse it can to demonize the whole at the, behest of, placating some concerns about minority blah blah, then you can keep that in mind and recognize the intersectionality as it stands, which is good. It's good, actually, to say don't disarm anyone. Don't disarm a white, straight guy, cis motherfucker, just because Columbine happened and the vast majority of mass shooters have been white, straight, and non-trans. And also, don't disarm trans people because a trans person did a mass shooting like once every 5 years. It's not real. It's all the same intersectional statist nonsense. And those intersections of oppression, those are where we fight. Or we lose. That's the choice. So that's my statement. Y'all are free to say what you want, and then I will close the stream with my usual schizo bullshit.
I am so glad that we were able to get everyone together to have this discussion. I feel like it's a lot more productive to have these sorts of discussions face to face rather than arguing over text about them.
Yeah,
it's really hard to gauge things like tone over text, or I don't know. Sometimes it's a little. It's harder to get out what it is you want to say, I think.
Yeah. And actually,
I'm glad that we're, trying to, have a civil conversation rather than just flaming each other on the internet.
Yeah, and actually make content that other people can see rather than it just being some tightly controlled space where all your messages could be deleted, for instance. Just inside reference for those of you who know. So
okay, that could actually apply to several situations, but I think I know which one he's referring to.
But so my whole thing is that's where I think we can unite, and I think that's what we need to do. And recognizing those centers of oppression, that's where we fight. And I think if we were willing to do that, and if we were willing to all just be a little bit more woke, maybe things could get better. That's my position.
Yeah, I agree. Every time we reach down to the bottom levels and we pull one of those levels up, we now have that many more people standing on the same ground staring down the state. And if we ignore those levels, we stay divided, we will all be killed. We do not unite, they are going to fuck us to death.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing it right now.
Yeah, no,
This is
we're all
not
gonna
in the
die.
future.
We're too busy
This is
fighting each other
now.
to notice.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, please say that again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I said yeah. No, we're all gonna die, and we're too busy fighting each other to notice.
Mm-hmm. And that's why they keep us in a panic. That's why Joe motherfucking Rogan couldn't just say, no, I was wrong about furries putting litter boxes in school bathrooms. Because
Oh, God.
he had to backtrack while also saying, no, but I heard it from somebody who
That
does
was such
know.
an obvious troll. Oh my God.
Yeah, that is
Someone
such crap,
actually
and
thought
people
that
are
would-
still talking about that like it's real,
Mm-hmm.
even though it has been debunked like all over the place. Not real, but
And
plus
Oklahoma,
also furries do not think they're animals. That's not how that works.
Yeah, that's
Furries are people who like to LARP being anthropomorphic, which is a whole fucking thing, and it is not at all new. Not to mention, they have been violently targeted throughout my whole life. Like, for the past 40 years, I know at least. I don't know if people are still violently targeting them, but we have, like, people on the streets and police violently targeting people because they like fursuits.
mm-hmm.
Is that not the weirdest shit I've ever heard?
Yeah,
I mean,
when-
that y'all have ever heard? Because it is some of the weirdest shit I've heard. Like,
Yeah,
what
when was
kind
the
of world are we in?
furries rioted the way like sports ball fans will riot because their team won and they start setting shit on fire or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever seen like furries or bronies like run around lighting shit on fire.
Be
Yeah.
fair,
Whatever other
they're
group is easy
Nazis
to hate.
in those communities.
Yeah.
There are Nazi bronies and Nazi furs.
Okay, yes,
But,
yes.
like, so there are some dangerous ones. Like, what? And let's not pretend that I have to always add that in. I'm like, just because it's a furry doesn't mean it's okay.
Yeah, and there are tankies there as
Nazi
well, and there are
bronies.
people who like
Nazi
there are
bronies.
and there are predators, and but there are that in every, and so the thing that I brought that up for was to just really tightly say, and I think that this is like, you know, sort of a good note to end it on. They will keep you afraid of the latest greatest boogeyman so that you never fight them in the shadows, so that you never fight them where they are, because you will constantly be hacking branches waiting for the next threat. And it is the only way that we come out of this, that we get past this mentality of accepting the latest, greatest feud that they want us to participate in, that they're puppeteering, and start fighting the real enemy and smashing the fucking state.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.